The day I lost everything started with a misplaced phone. Not mine, his. My father's smartphone, accidentally left on his desk while he rushed to a crucial business meeting. I wouldn't have touched it, except it kept buzzing with notifications that seemed urgent. That's when I saw them, the messages from Martina. My name is Lucille, and until that moment, I was the pampered daughter of one of Boston's most successful tech entrepreneurs. The messages made my stomach turn. Intimate photos, plans for their weekend getaway, discussion of their future together, and what they'd do with my trust fund. Daddy's little princess won't need all that money anyway, Martina had written. She's too naive to know what to do with it. My father's response, once we're married, we'll put it to better use. She'll understand eventually. I was still staring at the phone when he returned to his office. Sweetheart, what are you doing here? His voice carried that familiar warmth, but now it felt like poison. I held up his phone. Who's Martina? The color drained from his face. That's private. Private like the trust fund you're planning to steal from me? My voice cracked. Private like your affair? You had no right to look at my messages. His warmth vanished, replaced by cold fury. This is exactly why you're not ready for responsibility. You're still a child who doesn't understand boundaries. Don't you dare turn this around on me. I slammed the phone onto his desk. Does Mom know? His silence was answer enough. I'm telling her everything, I said, turning toward the door. If you do that, you'll regret it. His voice was steel. Everything you have, your apartment, your car, your lifestyle, it all comes from me. Think carefully about your next move. I faced him again. Are you threatening me? I'm stating facts. You're 25, Lucille. What can you possibly do on your own? The next few hours became a blur. I called Mom, told her everything. By evening, security was escorting me out of the building. My key card, deactivated. My company email, deleted. My trust fund, gone, transferred to Martina's account hours after our confrontation. That night, I sat in my expensive apartment, knowing I had days before the automatic rent payment would bounce. My phone buzzed with a text from Yosef, my best friend since college. Heard what happened? Need a place to crash? I stared at my designer furniture, my walk-in closet full of clothes I couldn't afford to keep. Yes, I typed back. And maybe a job lead? My cousin's cafe is hiring. It's not glamorous, but it's something. 3 days later, I was living in Yosef's spare room, wearing a coffee-stained apron and learning how to make lattes. My father's wedding announcement to Martina made the business news. They looked perfect together, the successful entrepreneur and his younger, equally ambitious bride. Your order, ma'am? I asked a customer, forcing a smile. Triple shot vanilla latte, extra hot, she said, not looking up from her phone. It was Patricia, though I didn't know it then. She'd become important later, but at that moment, she was just another customer who didn't see me. That night, counting my tips and researching business schools I might be able to afford, I made a promise to myself. I would take back everything, not through Daddy's money or connections, but through my own power. I'd make him regret the day he underestimated me. You okay? Yosef asked, finding me still awake at 2 a.m. No, I admitted, but I will be. I'm applying to business school. With what money? I showed him my laptop screen, student loans, scholarship applications, part-time program options. I'll figure it out. I have to. You know this won't be easy, right? I thought about Martina's message. She's too naive to know what to do with it. Good, I said, typing another application. I'm done with easy. It's time they learned what I'm really capable of. The cafe's morning shift started in 4 hours. I'd be exhausted, but that didn't matter. Every coffee I served, every dollar I saved, every late-night study session, They were all steps toward my goal. My father thought he'd broken me, but he'd only succeeded in setting me free. Now I had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Let them think I'm defeated. Let them believe I've disappeared into obscurity. They'll never see me coming until it's too late. 6 months into business school, and I was already drowning in coursework. Between morning shifts at the cafe, evening classes, and late-night study sessions, sleep had become a luxury I couldn't afford. But I was making it work. Barely. "You look like death warmed over," Yosef said, sliding a fresh coffee across his kitchen counter. "Thanks. Just what every girl wants to hear." I grabbed the coffee and my laptop. "I've got a presentation in corporate finance in 2 hours, and I still need to polish the slides." "The one about hostile takeovers?" I smiled despite my exhaustion. "The irony isn't lost on me." My phone buzzed, a news alert about my father's company. The stock had jumped 15% after announcing a merger with Martina's tech consulting firm. I forced myself to read the whole article, noting every detail. "Still tracking them?" Yosef asked, peering over my shoulder. "Know your enemy," I muttered, then caught his concerned look. "What?" "Nothing. Just don't lose yourself in this, okay?" Before I could respond, my phone rang. Patricia, the regular from the cafe who'd become something of a mentor after discovering I was in business school. "Lucille, are you sitting down?" Her voice crackled with excitement. "Remember that summer internship program I mentioned? A spot just opened up. It's yours if you want it." My heart raced. Patricia's venture capital firm was exactly where I needed to be. "When do I start?" "Next week. But fair warning, it's full time. You'll have to quit the cafe." I glanced at my bank account on my laptop screen. The numbers were already tight. "I can't afford to." "It's paid," she cut in, competitively. "And before you protest about fairness, you earned this. Your proposal for restructuring that failing startup last month? Brilliant." After hanging up, I turned to Yosef. "I got it, the internship at Walsh Ventures." He hugged me. "See, things are turning around." I need to go shopping, I realized, looking down at my coffee-stained jeans. I can't show up looking like a barista. "I know just the place," he grinned. "Discount Designer Boutique. My sister swears by it." That afternoon, armed with 2 new business suits and a confidence I hadn't felt in months, I walked into my corporate finance class. Professor Adams was discussing merger strategies when my classmate Sarah poked my arm. "Isn't that your dad's company?" she whispered, pointing to the projection screen. There it was, a case study on successful modern mergers, featuring my father's latest triumph. My hands clenched under the desk. "Ms. Craig," Professor Adams called out, "since you seem interested in this particular case, perhaps you'd like to share your thoughts on the merger strategy?" The class turned to look at me. They knew who I was, or rather, who I used to be. I stood, my voice steady. "The merger appears successful on paper, but there are concerning patterns in the quarterly reports. The acquired company's valuation seems inflated, and the projected synergies are optimistic at best." Professor Adams raised an eyebrow. "Interesting perspective. Care to elaborate?" For the next 5 minutes, I detailed everything wrong with my father's merger. Every weakness, every potential point of failure. When I finished, the room was silent. "Exceptional analysis," Professor Adams said finally. "Have you considered a career in corporate restructuring?" After class, Sarah caught up with me. "That was incredible. How did you know all that?" "Let's just say I pay attention to details." I checked my phone. An email from Patricia about orientation details. "Hey," Sarah said, "a bunch of us are getting drinks tonight to celebrate finishing midterms. Want to join?" I almost declined, my usual response to social invitations. But something stopped me. "You know what? Yes, I could use a break." That night at the bar, surrounded by classmates who knew me only as Lucille, the hardworking student, not Lucille, the disgraced heiress, I felt something shift. These people respected me for my mind, not my last name. To surviving midterms, Sarah raised her glass. And to new beginnings, I added, clinking glasses with the group. My phone buzzed again. Another news alert. My father's company had just announced Martina as their new chief strategy officer. The photo showed them together, smiling, her hand resting possessively on his arm. "Everything okay?" Sarah asked, noticing my expression. I locked my phone, shoving it into my bag. "Perfect. Actually, I have a question about that venture capital internship I just landed." The pieces were falling into place. Every class, every connection, every late night studying. They were all steps toward my goal. My father had taught me well. In business, knowledge is power, and I was gathering both. My first day at Walsh Ventures started with a surprise. Patricia wasn't just any partner, she was the founding partner, and she had plans for me. "Your desk," she said, gesturing to a space near her office. "I want you close enough to learn." I set down my new laptop bag, taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows and the Boston skyline beyond, a far cry from the cafe's cramped break room. "First task," Patricia continued, "we're reviewing pitches for a new AI startup accelerator. I want your analysis by lunch." As I dove into the work, a familiar face appeared at my desk. Shanice, the firm's rising star associate. "So, you're Patricia's new protege," she said, perching on my desk edge. "Heard about your corporate finance presentation. Gutsy move, criticizing that merger." I tensed. "You know who I am." "Please," she rolled her eyes. "I make it my business to know everything about everyone. Don't worry, your secret's safe. But I have a proposition for you." Before she could continue, commotion erupted near the reception area. My blood ran cold as I recognized the voices. "Martina, darling, the meeting's this way," my father's voice carried across the office. I ducked behind my monitor, but Shanice grabbed my arm. "Don't hide. You've done nothing wrong." They rounded the corner, my father in his usual tailored suit, Martina draped in designer wear that probably cost more than my yearly salary. They stopped cold when they saw me. "Lucille?" My father's face darkened. "What are you doing here?" "Working," I said, standing straight. "Like everyone else." Martina's perfectly painted lips curved into a smirk. "How quaint. From coffee shops to venture capital. Moving up in the world, aren't we?" "Ms. Delgado." Patricia's voice cut through the tension as she emerged from her office. "I see you've met my star intern. Lucille's analysis of your merger was particularly insightful." The color drained from Martina's face. My father's jaw tightened. "Patricia," he forced a smile, "I didn't realize you were mentoring new talent." "The best talent can come from unexpected places," Patricia replied smoothly. "Now, shall we discuss your funding request?" As they disappeared into the conference room, Shanice whistled low. "Okay, that was intense. You okay?" I realized my hands were shaking. "I need air." On the building's rooftop garden, Shanice handed me a coffee from the executive lounge. "So, about that proposition, I'm launching a tech startup. I need someone who understands corporate weaknesses and isn't afraid to exploit them. You want me to help you compete with my father's company?" "Better," she grinned. "I want us to build something that could eventually acquire it." I stared at her. "That's ambitious," says the girl who publicly dissected her father's merger strategy. "Look, I've got the technical expertise and industry connections. You've got the insider knowledge and the motivation. Together, we could be dangerous." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother, who I hadn't heard from in months. "Saw your father today. He's worried about what you might do. Be careful, sweetheart." I showed Shanice the message. Seems like I'm already dangerous enough. Good, she said, because this industry needs shaking up. You in? Back at my desk, I watched through the conference room's glass walls as Martina gestured animatedly about their expansion plans. Patricia caught my eye and gave a subtle head shake. The funding request wasn't going well. Rough meeting? I asked Patricia later as security escorted my father and Martina out. Let's just say their numbers didn't add up. She paused. You know, they're not as stable as they appear. The merger covered up some serious issues. I know, I said. That's why I'm joining Shanice's startup. Patricia's eyes sparkled. Good, because I'm gonna fund it. That evening, I sat in my new apartment, small but my own, paid for with my internship salary, and opened my laptop. On the screen, a business plan began to take shape. Not just any plan, but one that would target every weakness I discovered in my father's empire. My phone buzzed again, another text from Mom. Whatever you're planning, remember who you are. Don't let revenge change you. I thought about the girl I'd been a year ago, naive and trusting. She was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone who understood that sometimes justice requires a strategic mind and a willingness to strike first. I won't let it change me, I texted back. I'll let it reveal me. Across the city, in their penthouse apartment, my father and Martina were probably discussing their failed funding meeting, unaware that their real problems were just beginning. They'd taught me an expensive lesson about trust and power. Now it was time to show them exactly how well I'd learned it. Your father's company just lost their biggest client, Shanice announced, bursting into our startup's new office space. 6 months had transformed our two-person operation into a team of 15, with Patricia's backing opening doors we'd only dreamed of. I looked up from my laptop. How bad? Bad enough that their stock dropped 12% in an hour. She pulled up the financial news on our conference room screen. Apparently, Martina's innovative strategy wasn't so innovative after all. Our own company, Phoenix Tech Solutions, had been quietly growing, specializing in the exact services my father's company was failing to provide. Every client they lost seemed to find their way to us, though few knew of my connection. Speaking of clients, Yosef called from his desk. I'd hired him as our operations manager the moment we could afford it. That pharmaceutical company you mentioned, they're interested in meeting. My phone rang. Patricia. Turn on CNBC, she said without preamble. Your father's giving a press conference. There he was, looking older than I remembered, with Martina by his side. Their usual confidence seemed strained. While recent setbacks have presented challenges, he was saying, we remain committed to our vision of innovation and excellence. Translation, Shanice snorted. They're in deep trouble and trying to stop investors from jumping ship. Did you see their quarterly report? I asked Patricia. Just finished reviewing it. They're one bad quarter away from a crisis. Your father's betting everything on a new security platform launch next month. I smiled. The one with the critical firmware flaw? How did you? Never mind, I don't want to know. But yes, that one. After hanging up, I found Shanice staring at me. You knew about the flaw? Let's just say I have reliable sources. I'd been cultivating relationships with former employees my father had discarded over the years. Amazing what people would share over coffee and sympathy. We could warn them, Yosef suggested, ever the voice of conscience. Like they warned me before stealing my trust fund? I shook my head. They made their choices. That afternoon, I had lunch with Mom at her favorite cafe. She looked better than she had in years, finally free from my father's shadow. I saw the news, she said, stirring her tea. He called me, asked if I knew anything about your new company. What did you tell him? That he should have thought about consequences before betraying his own daughter. She reached for my hand. Just promise me something. When you make your move, Make it clean. Don't drag it out like he did with us. Mom, don't pretend this isn't what you've been planning. I know you, Lucille. You're my daughter, but you're also his. You learned strategy at his knee. Back at the office, Shanice was waiting with more news. Their security platform? 3 major clients just backed out of pre-orders. Apparently, someone leaked information about potential vulnerabilities. What a shame, I said, not bothering to hide my smile. Any word on their stock price? Down another 8%. But here's the interesting part. Martina's been selling her shares. Quietly, but not quietly enough. I raised an eyebrow. Rats leaving the sinking ship? More like rats trying to cash out before the ship even starts taking on water. That evening, as I was leaving the office, I ran into Martina in the building's lobby. She'd aged in the past year, stress lines evident despite her expensive makeup. "Enjoying the view?" she asked bitterly, gesturing at the Phoenix Tech Solutions sign being installed above our office door. "Just admiring the results of hard work," I replied. "Something you might want to try sometime." "You think you're so clever," she hissed, stepping closer. "But you have no idea what you're dealing with." "Actually, I do. Tell me, does my father know you've been selling your shares? Or about the offshore account you've been funneling money into?" Her face went pale. "How did you—" "Like you said, I'm clever. Here's some free advice. Get out while you can. What's coming next won't be pretty." As she hurried away, my phone buzzed with a text from Shanice. "Meeting with their former lead developer tomorrow. Says he has something we need to see." I typed back, "Perfect timing." That night, I stood at my apartment window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, my father was probably in his office, trying to save his crumbling empire. He'd taught me that business was like chess, always think several moves ahead. What he hadn't taught me was that sometimes the best revenge isn't a single devastating blow, but 1,000 tiny cuts, each one precisely placed to cause maximum damage. The game was entering its final phase, and I had all the pieces exactly where I wanted them. "They're desperate enough to consider selling," Patricia announced, dropping a thick folder on my desk. "Your father's board is pushing for a buyout before the stock price falls any further." I flipped through the documents, financial reports, internal memos, everything we needed. "And you're sure about this?" 3 board members approached me personally. She smiled. "They have no idea you're involved with Phoenix. Your father's been keeping your success very quiet." Shanice burst into my office, laptop in hand. "Their security platform launch? Complete disaster. 2 major vulnerabilities discovered in the first hour. Their stock is in free fall." My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "He's calling an emergency board meeting. It's time." I looked at Patricia. "How quickly can we put together a buyout offer?" "Give me 2 hours." The next few hours were a blur of meetings, calls, and paperwork. By evening, our offer was ready. Fair but firm, with conditions that would effectively remove both my father and Martina from any operational control. "Ready?" Shanice asked as we prepared to enter the conference room where my father's board was waiting. I straightened my jacket. I've been ready for this moment for 2 years. The room fell silent as we entered. My father's face went from confused to furious as he recognized me. "What is this?" he demanded. "This," I said, placing our offer on the table, "is your way out of the mess you've created." One of the board members, Harold, who'd known me since childhood, picked up the document. "Phoenix Tech Solutions. You're behind Phoenix?" "She's the CEO and majority shareholder," Patricia confirmed, stepping into the room, "and she's offering you a lifeline." Martina laughed, but it sounded hollow. "This is ridiculous. You can't seriously be considering an offer from—" "Your stock price has dropped 60% in 3 months," I cut in. "Your major clients are jumping ship. Your new platform is a security nightmare. And I turned to the board. Your CSO has been quietly selling her shares while telling everyone else to hold. The room erupted in chaos. Board members turned to stare at Martina, who had gone pale. This is a hostile takeover, my father snarled. No, I corrected him. This is karma. You taught me everything I know about business, remember? Including how to recognize when someone's vulnerable. Harold cleared his throat. The offer appears quite reasonable, actually. More than fair given our current situation. You can't be serious, my father started, but another board member cut him off. Israel, we need to consider this. The company won't survive another quarter like this one. I watched my father's face as reality sank in. He turned to Martina for support, but she was already gathering her things. I need to make some calls, she mumbled, hurrying from the room. She's running to move more money offshore, I announced to the room. You might want to freeze those accounts before she empties them completely. 2 hours later, the preliminary agreement was signed. My father sat alone at the conference table, staring at the papers. Why? He asked as everyone else filed out. You could have destroyed us completely. Why offer a buyout at all? Because I learned from your mistakes, I replied. You taught me that business is about power, but you forgot about legacy. This company was built by people who believed in it. They deserve better than watching it burn for your ego. And Martina? Already gone. She cleared out her office while we were signing the papers. Turns out she's been planning her exit strategy for months. He looked suddenly old, defeated. I lost everything. No, I corrected him. You threw everything away. There's a difference. Outside the conference room, Shanice was waiting with a bottle of champagne. We did it. Not yet, I said. We still have to fix everything they broke. But first, I pulled out my phone. I need to make a call. Mom answered on the first ring. Is it done? Yes. How would you like to come back as head of the charitable foundation? The one he pushed you out of? Her laugh was worth everything. Sweetheart, I thought you'd never ask. That night, as we celebrated in our office, Yosef raised his glass. To Phoenix rising from the ashes. To karma, Shanice added. To family, Mom said, squeezing my hand. I looked around at these people who had stood by me, who had believed in me when I had nothing. To second chances, I said, and to learning from our enemies. Somewhere across town, my father was probably sitting in his empty penthouse, wondering how his perfect world had crumbled so completely. But I wasn't thinking about him anymore. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, merging companies, rebuilding trust, creating something better from the ashes of his mistakes. For the first time in 2 years, revenge wasn't on my mind. The future was. The financial audit results are worse than we thought, Shanice said, spreading documents across my new office, my father's old office. Martina didn't just embezzle funds, she created an entire shadow accounting system. How bad? I asked, though the grim expressions around the conference table told me enough. 8 figures, Patricia replied, spread across various offshore accounts. The good news? We've frozen most of them. The bad news? The press got wind of it. Right on cue, my phone lit up with notifications. The story was breaking across all major business news outlets. Tech giant's former CSO accused of massive fraud. Your father's being questioned by the SEC, Yosef added, looking up from his tablet. They want to know how much he knew. Mom appeared in the doorway, looking concerned. Lucille, you need to see this. She handed me her phone. A video was playing. My father leaving the SEC building, surrounded by reporters. He looked haggard, destroyed. Mr. Craig, did you know about your wife's illegal activities? Was this connected to your daughter's takeover? Is it true Martina Delgado has fled the country? Turn it off, I said quietly. Despite everything, seeing him like this brought no satisfaction. There's more, Mom said. He's asking to meet with you. Says it's important. The room fell silent. Everyone knew what this meant. The first direct contact since the takeover 3 weeks ago. You don't have to see him, Shanice said protectively. Yes, I do. I stood up, set it up for this afternoon, in the small conference room. I'll be right outside if you need me, Yosef offered. The hours crawled by. At exactly 3, my father walked in, escorted by security. He'd aged years in weeks, his confident stride replaced by a weary shuffle. You wanted to see me? I kept my voice neutral. I need to tell you something. He sat heavily. About Martina, about everything. I already know about the fraud. No, he cut in. You don't know everything. When I met her, I was lost. Your mother and I were struggling, and Martina seemed to understand me. But she was playing me from the start. He pulled out a USB drive. This contains everything: bank records, emails, conversations she recorded. She was planning to use it against me if I ever turned on her. But you deserve to know the truth. I stared at the drive. Why are you giving me this? Because you won, he said simply. But more than that, you won fairly. You built something real while we were just creating illusions. I was blind, Lucille. Blind to what I had, blind to what I lost, blind to who you really are. And now? Now I'm facing federal charges. My wife has disappeared with millions, and my daughter. He smiled sadly. My daughter turned out to be smarter and stronger than I ever imagined. Before I could respond, Shanice burst in. Sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation. Martina's been found. Where? We both asked simultaneously. Singapore. Local authorities just arrested her trying to access one of the frozen accounts. They're extraditing her back to face charges. My father slumped in his chair. It's over then. Not quite, I said, picking up the USB drive. We still have to fix what you both broke. That evening, after the lawyers had gone through the drive's contents and added them to the mounting evidence, I found Mom in her new office. She was organizing plans for the foundation's relaunch. You okay? She asked, seeing my expression. I thought I'd feel different, I admitted. More satisfied, maybe. Instead, I just feel tired, she suggested. That's what revenge does, sweetheart. It takes more than it gives. My phone buzzed. A message from Patricia. Board approved your restructuring plan. Ready when you are. So, what now? Mom asked. I showed her the message. Now we rebuild. Not just the company, but everything. We do it right this time. Later, walking through the quiet office, I passed my father's old photos, now replaced with our new team pictures. Shanice was organizing tomorrow's announcements. Yosef was finalizing the new organizational chart, and everywhere, people were working late not out of fear, but excitement for what we were creating. My phone buzzed again. An email from my father's lawyer. He was pleading guilty to reduced charges in exchange for his cooperation against Martina. His last line read, "He wanted you to know first." Standing at the window where he used to stand, I watched the city lights flicker on. The empire he'd built had crumbled, but from its ashes, something stronger was emerging. Something built on truth, not lies, on collaboration, not fear. Ready to head out? Shanice called from the door. The team's grabbing dinner to celebrate the restructuring approval. I took one last look at the city. Yes, I said, turning away from the window. I'm ready. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters when Martina arrived for her sentencing. I watched from my car as she climbed the stairs, designer outfit replaced by a modest suit, her face drawn and pale. You don't have to be here, Shanice said from the driver's seat. The lawyers can handle it. Yes, I do. I checked my phone, a message from my father's lawyer, 15 minutes until his testimony. Inside, the courtroom was packed. My father sat in the witness box, looking smaller than I remembered. When Martina entered, their eyes met briefly before both looked away. "You may proceed," the judge said. My father cleared his throat. "I met Martina at a tech conference in 2019. She presented herself as a successful consultant, but it was all fabricated. Her company existed only on paper." "And when did you become aware of her fraudulent activities?" the prosecutor asked. "After the merger. But by then," he glanced at me in the gallery, "I was too proud to admit I'd been conned, too ashamed to face what I'd done to my family for a lie." Martina's lawyer jumped up. "Objection. The witness is—" "Overruled," the judge cut in. "Continue, Mr. Craig." For the next hour, my father detailed everything: the fake contracts, the hidden accounts, the manipulated records. With each revelation, Martina seemed to shrink further into herself. During a recess, Mom found me in the hallway. "You're doing the right thing being here." "Am I?" Sometimes I wonder if I should have just walked away, started fresh somewhere else, and let them keep hurting people. She squeezed my hand. "You did what needed to be done." Back in the courtroom, Martina's lawyer was making a last-ditch attempt to paint her as a victim of circumstance. It wasn't working. "The defendant knowingly and systematically defrauded investors," the prosecutor countered. "She stole not just money, but trust." The judge's verdict was swift: 8 years, plus restitution. As they led Martina away, she stopped beside me. "I hope you're happy," she spat. "You've destroyed everything." "No," I replied calmly. "You did that yourself. I just exposed the truth." Outside, reporters swarmed around us. "Ms. Craig, how does it feel to see your former stepmother convicted? Will Phoenix Tech be able to recover the stolen funds? Any comment on your father's testimony?" Shanice stepped in, shielding me. "Ms. Craig has no comment at this time. Please direct all questions to our legal team." Back at the office, Yosef was waiting with updates. "Stocks up 12% since the verdict. Investors are calling it a new era of transparency." "And the restructuring?" I asked. "Ahead of schedule. The team's actually excited about the changes." "Oh, and your father's lawyer called. He wants to know if you'll meet with him one last time before he reports to serve his reduced sentence." I hesitated. "Where?" "The old house. Tomorrow morning." The next day, I drove up to my childhood home. My father was in the garden, the place Mom had loved so much before everything fell apart. "Thank you for coming," he said, looking up from a rose bush. "I wanted you to have this." He handed me an envelope. Inside was a letter, dated the day before I discovered his affair. A letter to his lawyers, instructing them to transfer majority control of the company to me on my next birthday. "I was going to give you everything anyway," he said quietly. "Before Martina, before I lost my way. You were always meant to lead this company. Why show me this now? Because you deserve to know that I believed in you, even then. What you've built, how you've led. It's better than anything I ever did." "Dad, let me finish. I'm going away for 2 years. When I come back, I won't interfere. The company is yours, rightfully earned. Just take care of your mother, and maybe someday—" "Someday," I nodded, understanding the unspoken request for future forgiveness. That evening, I sat in my office, earned through work and determination, not given by birthright. Shanice and Yosef were arguing good-naturedly about the new project timeline. Mom was down the hall, revitalizing her foundation. Everything was different, yet somehow right. My phone buzzed, a text from Patricia. "Dinner tonight? We should discuss Phoenix's next chapter." I looked out at the city, the same view that had once represented my father's power. Now it represented possibility, potential, and most importantly, truth. "On my way," I texted back. The past was settled. It was time to focus on the future. The board meeting will begin in 5 minutes, Yosef announced, poking his head into my office. Everyone's waiting. I gathered my papers, pausing at the mirror to straighten my blazer. Through the glass walls, I could see the familiar faces filing into the conference room. Shanice, Patricia, Mom, and the board members who had stayed through the transition. Ready? Shanice asked, falling into step beside me. This is a big one. It's time, I nodded. They deserve to know. The room quieted as I took my place at the head of the table. These quarterly meetings had become a symbol of our company's transformation. Transparent, collaborative, focused on growth rather than power plays. Before we begin, I said, I want to share something personal. I pulled up a familiar image on the screen, the old company logo from my father's days. When I took over this company, many of you expected me to erase every trace of the past. But that would have been a mistake. Murmurs rippled through the room. Instead, we learned from it. We built something stronger. I clicked to the next slide, our current numbers. Our stock has tripled. Employee satisfaction is at record highs. Our new security platform is revolutionizing the industry. And now, Shanice added, we're about to announce the biggest initiative in company history. I nodded to Mom, who stood up. The Phoenix Foundation will be launching a scholarship program for underprivileged students interested in tech. Full ride, plus internships, funded entirely by company profits. But that's not all, I continued. We're also establishing an ethics board to oversee all major decisions, because power unchecked is power corrupted. Harold, the veteran board member, cleared his throat. Your father called me yesterday, from prison. The room tensed. I kept my voice steady. What did he want? To say he's proud of all of this, of you. Before I could respond, my assistant rushed in. Sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent. In the lobby stood Patricia's daughter, Sarah, clutching a laptop. You need to see this, she said, opening it. Someone's trying to hack our new platform. I smiled. I know, it's a test. Her eyes widened. What? Watch. I pulled up our security dashboard on the lobby screen. Lines of code flowed across it, showing the attack and our system's response. Every attempt they make reveals another weakness, which our AI patches in real time. That's brilliant, she breathed. That's what happens when you build something on truth instead of lies. I turned to find Shanice watching us. Ready to show her the rest? Back in the conference room, we unveiled the full scope of our plans. Not just scholarships and ethics boards, but a complete reimagining of what a tech company could be. Transparent, accountable, human. There's one more thing, I announced. I'm stepping back from day-to-day operations. Gasps filled the room. Not leaving, I clarified quickly. But it's time for new voices. Shanice will be taking over as CEO. I'll remain as board chair, focusing on strategy and mentorship. Like Patricia did for you, Mom said softly. Exactly. Because that's how we break the cycle. Not by hoarding power, but by sharing it. Not by fear, but by trust. Later, as the sun set over Boston, I found myself in the rooftop garden where this journey had really begun, where Shanice had first proposed building something that could challenge my father's empire. Quite a day, Yosef said, joining me. You okay? Better than okay. I showed him my phone, an email from the prison. My father had enrolled in a business ethics course, teaching it, not taking it. Sometimes people can surprise you. Speaking of surprises, Shanice called from the door. Your mother's foundation just received an anonymous donation, $10 million. Martina's restitution money, I realized. She finally paid it back. Full circle, Mom said, appearing with glasses of champagne. But this time, it's going to help people instead of hurt them. We stood there, watching the city lights flicker on, the same view that had once represented everything I'd lost. Now it showed everything we'd built instead. To Phoenix, Shanice raised her glass, not just rising from the ashes, but soaring beyond them. To family, Mom added, the ones we're born with and the ones we choose. To the future, Yosef said. I looked at these people who had become more than colleagues, more than friends. They were my true legacy. Not the money, not the revenge, not even the success. Just this, the power of truth, the strength of trust, and the endless possibility of beginning again. To beginning again, I said, raising my glass to meet theirs. And getting it right this time,